You either give my wife your room or pack your bags. My son, Paul, shouted those words right in the middle of dinner that I had cooked myself. He didn't whisper it. He didn't imply it. He yelled it in front of everyone, as if he were giving an order to an employee, as if my room was up for negotiation, as if I didn't have the right to say no in my own home. Julia, his wife, was sitting right next to him with that small, controlled smirk she used when she knew she was going to get her way. My sister-in-law, Dorothy, looked away, uncomfortable but staying completely silent. My granddaughter, Lauren, pressed her lips together and looked down. No one defended me. No one said a word. And I, Adeline Miller, 69 years old, a widow, a devoted mother for decades, just sat there feeling something inside me break in a strange way. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't anger, it was clarity. For the first time in a long time, I saw the situation exactly as it was. My son was kicking me out of my own bedroom as if I were a nuisance that needed to be relocated. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I took a deep breath, put my silverware down on the table, and said in a voice so calm that it even surprised me, "That's fine, Paul. I'm going to pack my bags." The silence that followed was heavy. Paul looked at me, confused, as if he had expected yelling or tears. Julia let out a nervous laugh. Dorothy cleared her throat. Lauren looked up, surprised. But I had already stood up, carefully folded my napkin, and was walking toward my room with my back straight. That night, while they were still in the dining room pretending things were normal, I was sitting on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand. I wasn't crying. I wasn't paralyzed. I was searching for houses for sale facing the ocean. There was a listing that Rita, my best friend, had sent me weeks ago via text message. It was a small, pretty house with a deck and an ocean view. She had written, "Adeline, look at this. Someday you and I are going to own a house like this, and we're going to toast while watching the sunset." I had responded with a laughing emoji, as if it were a distant fantasy. But that night, with the sound of glasses and fake laughter drifting in from the dining room, I opened that message and looked at it with new eyes. The house was 2 hours from the city. It had 2 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a price that, though high, fit perfectly within my savings. Savings that I had put together for years. Years of working as an independent accountant. Years of saving every dollar that was left over after paying the bills for this house. Years of saying no to trips, to splurges, to things I wanted for myself, because there was always something more urgent. Paul's college tuition, Paul's car, Paul's wedding, Paul and Julia's apartment rent when they couldn't afford it. I took a screenshot of the listing. I opened my banking app and checked my savings. I had enough. More than enough. And for the first time in decades, I thought something that made me feel dizzy and free at the same time. This money is mine. The next morning, at 7 a.m., I dialed the number for the real estate agent. A young woman with a professional voice answered. I told her I wanted to see the property that very day. There was a brief pause. Then she replied, "Perfect, Ms. Miller. I'll meet you at 11 a.m. I confirmed. I hung up and stared at the phone screen as if I had just crossed an invisible line. Paul came downstairs at 9 a.m., disheveled and yawning. He saw me sitting on the living room sofa and frowned. "Is breakfast ready yet?" "No," I replied without looking up. "I'm going out." "Where are you going so early?" "I have an appointment." He huffed, opened the refrigerator, and started taking things out as if this house were his. "Well, don't be out too long. Julia wants you to take her to the mall later." "I won't be able to," I said, and got up from the sofa before he could respond. Paul looked at me strangely, but he didn't say anything else. I went up to my room, which was now officially Julia's, according to what had happened the night before, and took clean clothes out of my closet. I got dressed calmly. A pair of jeans that Rita had convinced me to buy last month, a simple white blouse, my walking sneakers. I looked in the mirror and saw a 69-year-old woman who still had clarity in her eyes and resolve in her jaw. I left the house at 10:30 a.m. Paul was watching television in the living room. Julia was still sleeping. No one asked me where I was going. No one stopped me. I drove the 2 hours to the coast with the windows down and an old playlist of songs I used to listen to when I was young. It had been years since I had driven alone for so long. It had been years since I had done anything alone, in fact. There was always someone who needed something. There was always a call, a favor, an emergency. But that day, driving down the highway with the wind hitting my face, I felt light. I arrived at the house at exactly 11 a.m. The real estate agent was already there, a man in his 50s with a white shirt and a kind smile. "Ms. Miller, it's a pleasure. Come in." The house was even prettier in person. Small, yes, but full of light. The windows looked directly out to the ocean. The deck had enough space for a table and chairs. I could picture myself there, having coffee in the mornings, reading, listening to the waves. "What do you think?" the agent asked. "I think it's perfect," I replied. He smiled. "Would you like to think about it for a few days?" "No," I said. "I want to buy it now." The agent looked at me in surprise, as if he wasn't used to someone deciding so quickly. "Are you sure, Ms. Miller? It's a major decision. I've been making decisions for 69 years, I told him. This is the first one I'm making just for myself. He nodded, still a little bewildered, but he took the papers out of his briefcase. He explained the details. The price was $180,000. I could make the transfer in 2 days. The house was debt-free and ready for closing. I nodded as he spoke, but in my mind I was already running the numbers. I had $210,000 saved. I would be left with $30,000 for whatever came next. I signed the first documents right there, on the empty kitchen table of the house that already felt like mine. The agent gave me his card, explained the next steps, and told me that I could move in within 72 hours if I wanted. "Perfect," I told him. "I want to move in within 72 hours." I left the house with the temporary keys in my hand and stood on the deck looking at the sea. The waves came and went with a constant, predictable, calm rhythm. They didn't ask for anything. They didn't demand anything. They just existed. I took out my phone and snapped a photo of the horizon. I sent it to Rita in a text with a simple message. "I did it." She replied in seconds. "You did what?" "I bought the beach house." There was a long pause. Then the messages started pouring in, one after another. "You are not serious." "Adeline, answer. Did you really buy the house? When? How? Does Paul know?" I laughed to myself on that empty deck. "Paul doesn't know anything," I wrote, "and I'm not telling him until I'm already living here." Rita called me immediately. I answered, and before I could speak, she was already yelling with excitement. "Adeline Miller, I can't believe you did it. I am so proud of you. Tell me everything. What happened? What did Paul say when you told him?" "I haven't told him anything yet," I replied. "Yesterday at dinner, he yelled at me to either give Julia my room or pack my bags. So I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to pack my bags, and I'm going to leave." Rita was silent for a moment. Then she sighed. "That boy has no idea who he messed with, does he?" "No," I said, looking at the sea. "He has no idea." I drove back to the city that same afternoon. I drove slower, with no rush, enjoying the ride. When I arrived at the house, it was almost 6 p.m. Paul was in the living room watching a show on television. Julia was in the kitchen cooking something using my pots, my stove, as if she already owned the place. "Where were you?" Paul asked without looking up from the screen. "Handling some things," I replied, and went straight up to my room. I closed the door and stood in the middle of the room looking at everything I had accumulated over the years. Framed photos of Paul when he was a child. The clock my husband gave me before he died. The quilt I had bought on a trip to New Mexico. The books piled on the nightstand. Everything had a history, a memory, a piece of my life. But none of it made me feel at home anymore. I took 2 large suitcases out of the closet and started packing. Clothes first, then shoes. Important documents, jewelry, photos that really mattered to me, not the ones I kept out of obligation. I worked in silence for hours. No one came up to ask what I was doing. No one knocked on the door. At 10 p.m., Paul yelled from downstairs, "Mom, are you going to make dinner or what?" "No," I yelled back. "Get an order something." There was a silence. Then I heard murmuring, probably Paul complaining to Julia. But they didn't come up. They didn't insist. They were used to me always giving in, to me always solving things, to me always being available. I kept packing. The next day, very early, I called Rita. "I need you to do me a huge favor," I told her. "Anything," she replied. "I need you to come with me to the attorney's office. I'm going to put this house up for sale." There was a brief silence. Then Rita said in a firm voice, "I'll be there in half an hour." I ate breakfast alone in the kitchen. Paul and Julia were still sleeping in my room. I washed my cup, dried it, and put it away. Then I searched my phone for the contact information for Christine Rose, a lawyer I knew from my walking group. I sent her a text message. "Christine, I need urgent legal advice regarding property sale and a will. Do you have time this week?" She replied quickly, "I have time today at 4 p.m. Does that work for you?" "Perfect," I wrote. Rita arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. She rang the doorbell and I went out before Paul came downstairs. We hugged at the door and she looked into my eyes with that mix of worry and pride that only a friend of so many years can have. "Are you sure about this?" she asked me. "More sure than about anything in my life," I replied. We went to the attorney's office together. The process was faster than I thought. I put the house up for sale at a fair market price, $320,000. The lawyer explained that with that price and the location, it would probably sell in less than a month. "Perfect," I said. Rita joined me at a coffee shop afterward. We sat at a table by the window and she ordered 2 cappuccinos. "So what now?" she asked me. "Now I wait for both properties to sell," I said. "This house and the beach house, which is almost mine. When everything is settled, I'm leaving. No dramatic goodbyes, no long explanations. I'm just leaving." "And Paul?" "Paul is going to have to learn to live without using his mother as a solution to all his problems." Rita smiled and raised her cup. "I'll drink to that." We clinked our coffee cups as if they were champagne flutes. That afternoon, I went to my appointment with Christine. Her office was small but neat, filled with law books and perfectly labeled folders. She greeted me with a firm handshake and offered me water. "Tell me what you need, Adeline." I told her everything. The dinner, Paul's shouting, the purchase of the beach house, the sale of this house. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in a notebook. When I finished, she put her pen down on the desk and looked at me seriously. "Does Paul know any of this?" "No," I replied. "And I don't want him to know until it's done." "I understand," Christine said. "Legally, he doesn't have to know anything. The house is in your name. Your savings are yours. You are not married. You have no obligation to inform him about your financial decisions. Good. But, Christine continued, I need you to think about something important. What if Paul reacts badly? What if he tries to sue you or claim something? Let him try, I said. I don't owe him anything. I gave him everything for 42 years. That's enough. Christine nodded. Then we're going to do this right. I'm going to prepare a document that makes it clear that your assets are yours and that any future transfer will be on your terms. I'm also going to update your will. My will? Yes. Because if something happens to you, I want you to have total control over who receives what. Is there anyone besides Paul? My granddaughter, Lauren, I said. She's always been different. She has always treated me with real affection, not out of obligation. Perfect. We're going to include her. I left that office feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Control over my life, over my money, over my future. The next few days in that house were strange. I was still living there, cooking, cleaning, doing the things I had always done, but something had changed. I no longer did it automatically. I did it knowing that every day that passed was one day less in that place. Paul and Julia had settled into my room as if it had always been theirs. Julia reorganized the closet, moved the furniture, hung her clothes where mine used to be. Paul didn't say anything. He didn't ask how I felt sleeping in the guest room. He didn't ask if I was upset. He simply assumed that I had accepted my place. One afternoon, while I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, Julia came downstairs with a handwritten list. Adeline, she said without a greeting, I need you to go to the grocery store and buy these things. Paul and I are inviting some friends over on Saturday. She handed me the list. I read the items. Expensive wine, imported cheeses, premium cuts of steak, desserts from a specific bakery. Everything easily added up to more than $200. And who is going to pay for this? I asked without looking up from the paper. Julia looked at me as if the question were absurd. Well, you. Obviously, it's your house. Ah, I replied, carefully folding the list. I thought it wasn't my house anymore. I thought it was theirs now. She frowned. Don't start with the drama, Adeline. You know what I mean. Yes, I know exactly what you mean, I said, and gave the list back to her. If you want to have a party, that's fine, but you're paying for it. Julia's mouth dropped open, surprised. What is wrong with you? Why are you acting like this? I'm not acting any way, I replied calmly. I'm just telling you that if you want to host something, you host it with your money. She scoffed and stormed out of the kitchen shouting, Paul, your mum is being impossible. Paul came down the stairs with a look of annoyance. What's going on now? Your mum says she won't pay for the food for the party on Saturday, Julia said, crossing her arms. Paul looked at me as if I were a spoiled child. Mum, don't be difficult. It's just a dinner. Exactly, I said. It's just a dinner, which you can afford. And may I ask what has gotten into you lately? Paul asked, raising his voice. Since last week you've been strange. You talk back. You don't help. It seems like you're annoyed that we're here. I'm not annoyed that you're here, I said, looking him straight in the eye. I'm annoyed that you treat me as if I work for you. No one is treating you like that, Julia said. No? I asked. Then what do you call what happened at dinner last week? What do you call yelling at me to pack my bags if I didn't give you my room? There was an awkward silence. Paul looked away. Julia pressed her lips together. You were overreacting, Mum, Paul finally said. I didn't yell at you. I just asked you to be reasonable. You asked me to be reasonable, I repeated slowly. By yelling at me, in front of everyone. It was a misunderstanding, Julia intervened softly. using that voice she used when she wanted to sound like the mediator. We were all stressed. Paul didn't mean to say it that way, but he did say it that way, I replied. And you took my room, so I guess the misunderstanding worked out fine for you. Paul huffed. You know what? I'm not going to argue about this. If you don't want to help with the food, don't help. We'll figure it out ourselves. Perfect, I said, and went back to what I was doing. They went back upstairs to the bedroom, murmuring to each other. I heard fragments. She's unbearable. I don't know what's wrong with her. She wasn't like this before. They were right. I wasn't like that before. Before I said yes to everything. Before I apologized for things that weren't my fault. Before I lived to please them. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I went downstairs to the living room and sat on the sofa with my phone. I opened my chat with Rita and wrote, "Every day I spend here, I realize how much time I wasted being the person they wanted me to be." She replied immediately, despite the hour. "But you're not wasting time anymore. Now you're getting it back." I smiled in the darkness of the living room. The next day, the real estate agent called me. "Ms. Miller, I have good news. There are already 3 people interested in viewing your house. Can we schedule visits for this week?" "Yes," I replied, "but I need them to be at specific times, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., when my son is not here." The agent didn't ask any questions. He just said, "Perfect. I'll organize everything and confirm with you." I hung up and stared at the phone. This was happening. It was really happening. On Wednesday, the first couple came to see the house. Paul and Julia had gone out to run some errands. I greeted the agent and the potential buyers at the door. They were young, recently married, with that excitement in their eyes that comes with looking for your first home. I showed them every room, the spacious kitchen, the brightly lit living room, the small but well-maintained backyard. They asked questions, took photos, measured spaces. Finally, at the door, they told me, "It's beautiful, Mom. We'll think about it and let you know." 2 other visits came that week, all while Paul was out. All ended with the same phrase, "We'll think about it." On Friday, Christine called me. "Adeline, the documents are ready. Can you come in and sign them?" "I'll be there tomorrow," I said. Saturday morning, while Paul and Julia were still sleeping, I left the house and drove to Christine's office. She greeted me with freshly brewed coffee and a thick folder full of papers. "This is your updated will," she said, pointing to the first document. "Lauren receives 60% of your assets. Paul receives 40%. And here is the clause that specifies that if anyone tries to contest the will, they automatically forfeit their share." I signed each page feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because I was protecting what was mine. Sadness because I had to protect myself from my own son. "How do you feel?" Christine asked when I finished signing. "Like I'm finally waking up," I replied. That afternoon, when I returned home, Paul and Julia were in the living room arguing in low voices. When they saw me enter, they immediately stopped talking. "Where were you?" Paul asked. "Out," I replied without giving details. "Out where?" "Handling some things." He looked at me suspiciously, but didn't press the issue. Julia, on the other hand, had that expression she got when she was planning something. "Adeline," she said sweetly, "we need to talk to you about something important." I sat down in the armchair across from them. "What is it?" "Paul and I were evicted from our apartment," Julia said directly. "The owner wants to sell it, and we have to be out in 2 weeks." "I'm so sorry," I said. "Are you looking for another place yet?" "Well," Paul said, "we thought we could stay here for a while. There's enough space, after all." "Here?" I repeated. "Yes," Julia said. "It wouldn't be forever." Just until we find something. A few months, maybe. I looked her in the eyes. Then I looked at Paul. They both looked at me with that mix of expectation and demand disguised as need. No, I said simply. What? Paul asked. No, you can't stay here. Mum, Paul said, raising his voice. We're your family. Are you going to leave us on the street? I'm not going to leave you on the street, I replied calmly. I'm going to let you solve your problems like the adults you are. Paul stood up abruptly. I can't believe what I'm hearing. What is wrong with you, Mum? Since when are you so selfish? Selfish. I repeated the word slowly, letting it resonate in the air. It's interesting that you use that word. And what else do you want me to call it? He said, throwing his hands up. You have this huge house all to yourself and you don't want to help your own son. This house is not huge, Paul. It has 3 bedrooms. One is mine, which you now occupy. Another is the guest room where I sleep now. And the third is my home office where I work. Well, turn the office into a bedroom, Julia said. It's not that hard. I looked at her intently. My office is where I earn the money that pays for this house. Where do you suggest I work? In the kitchen? Don't be dramatic, Paul said. You always exaggerate everything. I took a deep breath. I'm not going to argue about this. The answer is no. Mum, Paul said, changing his tone, now softer, more manipulative. I know you've been stressed lately. I know I might have said things I shouldn't have at dinner. But we are family. Families help each other. Families respect each other, I replied. And you haven't respected me in a long time. That's not true. No? I asked. What do you call yelling at me to pack my bags if I didn't give you my room? Respect. I already apologized for that. He lied. He hadn't said it. He had never said it. But I knew that inventing it was his way of getting out of the conversation. No, Paul. You didn't apologize. You didn't even acknowledge that you did it. Julia intervened with that victim voice she knew how to use so well. Adeline, we are really in a difficult situation. We have nowhere to go. Are you really going to turn your back on us? You are adults with jobs, I replied. You can rent another place. You can get a loan. You can do what millions of people do when they need housing. But you're his mother, Julia insisted. Mothers are supposed to help. And I did, I said, getting up from the armchair. I helped you for 42 years. I paid for your college, Paul. I bought you your first car. I lent you money for the wedding. I've helped you with rent more times than I can count. I've helped enough. I can't believe you're being like this, Paul said in a shaky voice, pretending to be on the verge of tears. My own mother denying me a roof over my head. I'm not denying you a roof over your head, I said, walking toward the stairs. I'm denying you my roof. There is a difference. I went up to my room, the guest room, and closed the door. I heard Paul and Julia talking downstairs, their voices rising in volume. I heard loose words. Ungrateful, selfish, bitter old woman. I sat on the bed and opened my phone. I texted Rita. It just happened. They asked to move in here. I told them no. She replied with a voice memo. Her voice sounded proud. Adeline Miller, you are my hero. How did they take it? As expected, I wrote. Shouting, threats, drama. Oh, please, Rita replied with another voice memo. Selfish is what they've been to you all your life. You're just setting boundaries. That's not selfishness, it's survival. I smiled, looking at the screen. Thanks, Rita. That night, Paul and Julia went out without telling me where they were going. They returned late, after midnight. I heard them go up the stairs, enter my old room, and close the door harder than necessary. Sunday morning, I woke up early as always. I went down to the kitchen and made coffee just for myself. I no longer made breakfast for everyone. I no longer set the table for 3. I just poured my cup, made my toast, cut my fruit. Paul came downstairs around 11 a.m., looking like he hadn't slept well. He saw me sitting at the table reading the news on my tablet and didn't say anything. He went straight to the coffee maker, poured himself a cup, and stood leaning against the counter, staring at me. "What?" I asked without looking up. "Nothing," he said. "I'm just wondering what happened to you." "What happened to me?" I repeated. "Yes, you used to be different. You used to care about your family." I put the tablet down on the table and looked at him directly. "I used to care about my family so much that I forgot about myself. That is the difference." He scoffed. "That sounds like something you read in a cheap self-help book." "It sounds like something I should have figured out 30 years ago," I replied. Paul put the cup down hard on the counter. "You know what, Mum? Do whatever you want. After all, you've always done what you wanted." I laughed. It was a short, almost bitter laugh. "Paul, if I had done what I wanted, I would have traveled the world when your dad died. I would have gotten the master's degree I always wanted. I would have lived alone and in peace. But no, I stayed here, taking care of you, helping you, waiting for you to value me even a little." "I do value you," he said, without conviction. "No, Paul, you use me. And there is a huge difference between valuing and using." He went silent. He had no answer for that because he knew it was true. Julia came downstairs a few minutes later, already dressed, with perfect makeup and that superior attitude she always carried. "Good morning," she said without looking at me. "Good morning," I replied. She poured herself coffee and sat down next to Paul. They both ignored me, talking to each other in low voices as if I weren't there. "Adeline," Julia said suddenly, "we need to use your car today. Ours is giving us problems." "No," I said. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, I'm not lending you my car." "And how are we supposed to get around?" Paul asked. "By taxi, by Uber, walking, like everyone else." Julia let out a dry laugh. "Unbelievable. First you won't let us stay here, and now you won't even lend us the car. What's next? Are you going to charge us for the air we breathe in your house? If you want, you can leave right now and breathe air somewhere else," I said, without getting upset. Paul slammed his hand on the table. "Stop. That's enough, Mum. I don't know what's wrong with you, but this is too much." "What's wrong with me, Paul, is that I got tired. I got tired of being invisible. I got tired of being treated like a maid. I got tired of you assuming that everything I own is yours." "No one assumes that," Julia lied. "No?" I asked. "Then tell me, Julia, why are you sleeping in my bedroom? Why do you use my kitchen as if it were yours? Why do you assume I'm going to pay for your parties and lend you my things?" She opened her mouth, but didn't say anything. I got up from the table, washed my cup, and left the kitchen. I went up to my room and locked the door. I sat on the bed and took several deep breaths. My phone rang. It was a message from the real estate agent. "Ms. Miller, the young couple who came on Wednesday wants to make an offer, $315,000. Are you interested?" I replied immediately, "Yes, I accept." "Perfect," he wrote. "I'll prepare the papers. We can close the sale in 1 week." 1 week. In 1 week this house would no longer be mine. And Paul had no idea. That afternoon, while they were upstairs, I went down to the living room and started packing things discreetly. Photos I really wanted to keep. books that mattered to me, documents. I put everything in boxes that I hid in the guest room. Paul and Julia didn't notice anything. They were too busy with their own drama. Monday morning, while Paul and Julia were still sleeping, I left the house with 3 boxes in the car. I took them to a storage unit I had rented the previous week. It was a small space, enough to store the essentials until I moved permanently to the beach house. The storage facility employee helped me register my name and handed me the keys. "Are you moving a lot of things?" she asked kindly. "Only the important things," I replied. I returned home before noon. Paul was in the living room with his laptop, working from the sofa. He saw me enter but didn't say anything. I went straight up to my temporary room and continued organizing. That afternoon, I received a message from Christine. "Adeline, the buyer of your house wants to expedite the closing. It can be ready by Thursday. Does that work for you?" I stared at the message for several seconds. Thursday. 3 days. In 3 days, this house would officially stop being mine. "Perfect," I wrote. "Thursday is fine." I immediately called Rita. "I need you to come with me on Thursday to sign the sale of the house." "I'll be there," she said without hesitation. "Do you know when you're moving to the beach?" "Friday," I replied. "I'm signing the sale on Thursday, and I'm leaving on Friday." "And Paul?" "Paul will find out on Thursday night, when there's no turning back." Rita was silent for a moment. "Are you sure you want to do it that way?" "Completely sure," I said. "If I tell him before, he's going to try to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty, to convince me not to do it. I've made my decision, and I'm not going to let him change it." "You're right," Rita said. "You're stronger than you think, Adeline." "I'm learning to be," I replied. The next few days were strange. I was still living in that house, walking the hallways, cooking in the kitchen, but mentally I was no longer there. I was at the beach, in my new house, in my new life. Paul and Julia noticed my distance, but they interpreted it as temporary anger. They thought it would eventually pass, that I would go back to being the compliant mother I always was. On Tuesday, Julia tried a different strategy. She entered the kitchen while I was preparing food with a forced smile on her face. "Adeline," she said sweetly, "I know things have been tense lately, and I want you to know that I'm sorry." I looked at her without saying anything. "Truly," she continued, "Paul and I have been very stressed with the apartment situation, and I don't think we've been fair to you." "Huh," I said, continuing with what I was doing. "What I mean is that we value everything you do for us, and we want to make it up to you." "Make it up to me?" I asked. "Yes," she said, taking out her phone. "Look, I found this spa that has a full day package. Massages, facial, everything. I thought we could go together this weekend. You and me, like friends." I looked her directly in the eyes. "Who is going to pay for that spa, Julia?" She blinked, uncomfortable. "Well, I thought maybe you could treat me. You know, as a gesture of—" "No," I interrupted her. "I'm not going to treat you to any spa." Her smile vanished. "It was just an idea," she said sharply. "You don't have to be rude." "I'm not being rude," I replied. "I'm being clear. I'm not going to spend my money buying you things so you can pretend that you appreciate me." She opened her mouth, offended. "I'm not pretending anything." "Yes, you are, Julia, and we both know it." She walked out of the kitchen muttering something I couldn't hear. I didn't care. Wednesday night, Paul attempted his own approach. He knocked on my door around 10 p.m. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Go ahead," I said. He came in and sat on the edge of the bed. I was folding clothes, putting the last things in my suitcase. "Mom," he said tiredly, I don't want us to be fighting. We're not fighting, Paul, I replied without looking at him. I'm just no longer willing to let you disrespect me. I never meant to disrespect you. But you did, I said, stopping and looking at him. You did when you yelled at me at dinner. You did when you took my room without asking if it was okay. You did every time you assumed I was going to solve your problems. He ran his hands over his face. I don't know what else you want me to do. I already told you I'm sorry. You haven't said you're sorry, Paul. You've said you regret that I'm upset. It's not the same. He went silent. Do you know what the problem is? I continued. You think that saying I'm sorry will magically make everything go back to how it was before. But it doesn't work that way. You can't disrespect me and expect me to just forget about it. It wasn't my intention to make you feel bad, he said. And for the first time he sounded genuine. But you did, I replied. And intentions don't change the damage. He nodded slowly. What can I do to fix it? Nothing, Paul. It's too late to fix it. He looked at me, confused. What does that mean? It means I've already made decisions about my life, and I'm not going to change them. What decisions? You'll find out soon enough, I said, and went back to folding clothes. He stayed sitting there for a few more minutes, waiting for me to say something else, but I didn't. Finally, he got up and left the room, closing the door softly. That night, I barely slept. Tomorrow was Thursday. Tomorrow I was going to sign the sale. Tomorrow, everything would change. I got up early. I dressed carefully. Black pants, a white blouse, my pearl earrings. I wanted to look good, to feel good for this moment. I went down to the kitchen and made coffee. Paul and Julia were still sleeping. I left a note on the table. Out running errands, back in the afternoon. Rita picked me up at 9 a.m. sharp. I got into her car, and before starting the engine, she looked at me seriously. Ready? More than ready, I replied. We went straight to the attorney's office. The buyer was already there, a young man in his 35th year with his wife. We greeted each other formally and sat around the notary's table. The notary read all the documents in that monotonous voice that lawyers have. He explained the terms, the conditions, the dates. The buyer was going to pay $315,000. The transaction would be completed today. I had until Sunday to completely vacate the property. Any questions? The notary said. None, I replied. I signed each page, one after another. My name in cursive, Adeline Miller, sealing the end of an era. When I finished, the notary handed me a check. $315,000. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of freedom. Rita squeezed my hand under the table. We left the attorney's office around noon. Rita hugged me on the street. You did it, she said. You really did it. Yes, I replied, and was surprised to feel tears in my eyes. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. Do you want to get something to eat before going back? Rita asked. Yes, I said. I want to celebrate. We went to a small restaurant we liked, one with a view of a park. We ordered white wine and pasta. We toasted to new beginnings. When are you going to tell them? Rita asked. Tonight, I replied, when I get home. Do you want me to go with you? No, I said. I have to do this alone. I returned home around 5 p.m. Paul's car was parked outside. I took a deep breath before opening the door. I entered the house and found Paul and Julia in the living room watching television. They looked up when they saw me arrive. Where were you? Paul asked. Handling some things, I replied, putting my purse on the dining room table. What things? Julia insisted. Mine, I said simply. She looked at me with that annoyed expression I knew so well, but didn't say anything else. I went up to my room and sat there on the bed for several minutes, mentally preparing myself for what was coming. At 7 p.m., I went downstairs again. Paul was in the kitchen making himself a sandwich. Julia was still in the living room with her phone in her hand. "Paul, Julia," I said from the kitchen doorway. "I need to talk to you." Paul put the knife down on the counter. "About what?" "Come to the living room, please." They both followed me with expressions of curiosity mixed with irritation. We sat down, them on the sofa, me in the individual armchair. I took a deep breath and spoke in a clear, firm voice. "I sold the house." There was absolute silence. Paul looked at me as if he hadn't understood the words. Julia blinked several times. "What did you say?" Paul finally asked. "I sold the house. I signed the papers this morning. The new owners take possession on Sunday." Paul stood up abruptly. "What? You can't do that." "I already did," I replied calmly. "This is my house," he shouted. "I grew up here. You can't sell it without consulting me." "This house is in my name, Paul. I don't need to consult you about anything." Julia also stood up. Wait. And where exactly are we supposed to live?" "That is your problem, not mine," I replied. "Our problem?" Paul repeated incredulously. "Mum, you just made us homeless. You were already homeless here a week ago, when I told you that you couldn't stay. The problem is that you didn't believe me." "This can't be happening," Julia said, pacing back and forth. "This has to be a joke." "It's not a joke," I said. "You have until Sunday to get your things out." "No," Paul shouted. "I'm not accepting this. I'm going to talk to a lawyer. I'm going to contest the sale." "You can try," I replied. "But the house was in my name. There are no debts, there is no mortgage, and the sale is completely legal. I already consulted with my lawyer." "Your lawyer?" Paul asked. "Since when do you have a lawyer?" "Since I decided it was time to protect what is mine." Julia pointed a finger at me. "You are selfish, a cruel, selfish old woman." I looked at her without blinking. "Tell me, Julia, am I selfish because I sold my house, or am I selfish because I didn't allow you to keep using me?" "We are using you," Paul shouted. "We are your family. And I am your mother, not your solution to all your problems." Paul ran his hands through his hair, clearly desperate. "Mum, please. There has to be a way to fix this. Cancel the sale. Tell them you changed your mind." "I'm not cancelling anything, but we have nowhere to go." "Then start looking," I said, getting up from the armchair. "You have 3 days." Paul blocked my path. "I'm not going to let you do this." "Move, Paul," I said in a low but firm voice. "Not until you explain what the heck is wrong with you. Who are you? Because this person is not my mother." "You're right," I replied. "This is not the mother you knew. That mother got tired of being invisible. This mother decided to live for herself." I gently pushed him aside and went up the stairs. I heard Julia shouting downstairs. "This is not over, we're going to sue you." "Go ahead," I yelled from upstairs. "Talk to all the lawyers you want." I entered my room and locked the door. I sat on the bed and waited for my heart to stop beating so fast. I had done it. I had told them the truth, and the sky hadn't fallen. My phone rang. It was Rita. "Did you tell them?" "Yes," I replied. "How did they react?" "As expected. Shouting. Threats. Drama. Are you okay?" "I'm perfect," I said. And I was surprised to realize it was true. That night I didn't sleep. I listened to Paul and Julia arguing until late, their voices rising and falling, alternating between rage and panic. At some point, I heard Julia crying. Paul called someone on the phone, probably a lawyer, but from what I could hear, they told him the same thing I already knew. The sale was legal. Friday morning, I went down to the kitchen early. Paul was already there, sitting at the table with a cup of cold coffee in front of him. He had deep, dark circles under his eyes, and his hair was messy. "Mum," he said when he saw me, "we need to talk." "We talked yesterday," I replied, pouring myself coffee. "No, really talk. Without shouting. Please." I sat down across from him. "Talk." "I know I messed up," he said, looking at his cup. "I know I said horrible things. I know I treated you badly." "Yes, you did." "And I'm sorry. I really am sorry." I looked into his eyes, searching for sincerity. I found desperation. "Paul," I said softly, "the problem isn't just what you said at dinner. The problem is that that dinner was just the last straw. It's been years of you treating me as if I existed only to solve your problems." "That's not true," he protested weakly. "Yes, it is," I insisted. "When was the last time you asked me how I was? When was the last time you visited me just because you wanted to see me, not because you needed something?" He was silent. "Exactly," I said. "You don't remember because it never happened." "I'm going to change," he said. "I promise you. I'm going to be a better son." "I don't need you to be a better son, Paul. It's too late for that. What I need is to live my life without feeling like I owe something to someone all the time." "And what am I supposed to do?" he asked, and for the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. "What all adults do," I replied. "Figure it out." Julia came downstairs at that moment, also with dark circles under her eyes, also dishevelled. She looked at both of us and then poured herself coffee without saying a word. The atmosphere in the house that Friday was tense and silent. Paul and Julia spent most of the day in their room, on the phone, looking for apartments, talking to potential landlords, moving their minimal life from one place to another. I continued packing my things calmly. Every object I put away was one step closer to my freedom. Mid-afternoon, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Miss Miller," said a young woman's voice. "Yes, this is she." "This is Lauren." My granddaughter. The only person in this whole family who had treated me with genuine affection. "Hello, my love," I said, feeling my voice soften. "Grandma," she said, and she sounded worried. "My dad called me. He told me you sold the house." "Yes, Lauren, I sold it." "Is that true?" "Completely true." There was a pause. Then she said, "Good." "Good?" I asked, surprised. "Yes, good. I heard what my dad said to you at dinner last week. I was there. Remember? I was embarrassed. I was angry, but I didn't know what to say." I felt a knot in my throat. "What you did is right, Grandma," Lauren continued. "You deserve to live your life. You deserve respect. And if my dad won't give it to you, then you deserve to walk away." "Thank you, my love," I said, my voice breaking. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I bought a house at the beach," I replied. "Small, quiet, with an ocean view." "That sounds beautiful." "It is." "Can I visit you?" she asked timidly. "Anytime you want, Lauren. You will always be welcome." After hanging up with Lauren, I sat in my room looking out the window. Hearing her support had been like receiving a hug after days of coldness. At least someone in this family understood. Saturday dawned cloudy. I woke up early and continued packing. I already had 4 full suitcases and 6 closed boxes. Rita was coming to help me take everything to the storage unit later. I went down to the kitchen and found Julia sitting at the table with her laptop open. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying all night. "Good morning," I said neutrally. She didn't even look up. "It's not," she replied. I poured myself coffee and leaned against the counter. The silence was dense, uncomfortable. "We found an apartment," Julia finally said without looking at me. "It's awful. Small, old, in a bad area. But it's the only thing we can afford." I didn't say anything. "It costs $1,200 a month," she continued, "more than double what we were paying before. And they're asking for 2 months' deposit plus the first month. That's $3,600 that we don't have." She kept talking as if I was going to offer help, as if all this were a negotiation. "We're going to have to borrow," she said, finally looking at me. "Probably from my sister, who will never let us forget that she had to rescue us." "You're still expecting me to offer to pay for it, aren't you?" I asked. "You're his mother," Julia replied. "I thought you would at least care." "I do care about Paul," I said. "What I don't care about is continuing to be his permanent solution to problems that he creates himself." "We didn't create this," she said, raising her voice. "You created it. You made us homeless." "You had a home," I replied calmly. "An apartment you were renting, which you lost because you couldn't pay for it. That's not my fault. We could have stayed here." "No, you couldn't. This is my house and I decided to sell it." "You are cruel," Julia said, her voice trembling. "I always thought you were a good person, but you're cruel." I looked at her directly. "Do you know what's cruel, Julia? Cruel is yelling at someone to pack their bags in their own home. Cruel is taking someone's room without asking them. Cruel is assuming that someone exists only to serve you." "I never did that." "Yes, you did. From the day you entered this family, you treated me like an employee, not a mother-in-law." Julia slammed her laptop shut. "I'm not going to argue with you anymore. You won, after all. You humiliated us. You made it clear that you don't want us here." "It's not about wanting you or not wanting you," I said. "It's about the fact that I'm no longer going to sacrifice my peace for your convenience." She grabbed her laptop and left the kitchen without saying anything else. Rita arrived at 10 a.m. in her SUV. The two of us started taking the boxes and suitcases downstairs. Paul came out of his room when he heard the noise. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Taking my things to the storage unit," I replied. "Now? Aren't you going to wait until tomorrow?" "There's no reason to wait." He stood on the stairs, watching me carry down one box after another. He didn't offer to help. He just watched with an expression that was a mix of confused and hurt. Rita and I made 3 trips to the storage unit. On the last one, as we closed the door of the SUV, Rita said to me, "Tomorrow is the big day." "Tomorrow I leave," I confirmed. "How do you feel?" "Light," I replied, as if a weight I've been carrying for decades has been lifted. We returned to the house at noon. Paul and Julia were packing too. I saw boxes in the living room, clothes piled up, objects scattered around. The house that had been my home for so many years now looked like a place being dismantled. I went up to my room and took the last things out of the drawers. Old photos, letters, documents, everything fit in a small box. It was surprising how little I actually needed. That night I made dinner just for myself. A simple plate of pasta. Paul and Julia ordered takeout and ate in their room. We didn't see each other all afternoon. Around 9 p.m., someone knocked on my door. It was Paul. It was Buzz. "Can I come in?" "Go ahead." He came in and stood by the door, uncomfortable. "You're leaving tomorrow," he said. "Yes." "Do you know where?" "To the beach." "You bought another house?" Yes. He was silent for a moment. Then he asked, "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the night of the dinner," I replied. "Since you yelled at me." Paul looked down. "I didn't think you would go this far." "Neither did I admitted. "But when I made the decision, I knew it was the right one. Is there anything I can say to make you change your mind?" "No, not anymore." He nodded slowly. "Are you going to be okay? Alone in a new house, far from everything?" "I'm going to be better than ever," I said with conviction. "And us?" "You're going to have to learn to be okay without me." Paul ran his hand over his face. He was silent for so long that I thought he had left without me realizing it. But he was still there, leaning against the wall. "I'm sorry I failed you," he finally said in a low voice. I looked at him and saw something I hadn't seen in years: genuine vulnerability. "I regret a lot of things too, Paul," I replied. "I regret not setting boundaries sooner. I regret letting you treat me like this for so long. I regret confusing love with sacrifice." He looked up. "Don't you love me anymore?" "I do love you," I said. "You are my son, and I will always love you, but I'm not going to let that love destroy me anymore." Paul nodded, his eyes glistening. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this." His words hurt, but not like before. They didn't pierce my chest with paralyzing guilt. They just hurt the way uncomfortable truth hurts. "That's okay, Paul," I said. "I don't need your forgiveness. I need my peace." He left the room, closing the door softly. That night I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. There was no anxiety, no insomnia, no tossing and turning, wondering if I was doing the right thing. I knew I was. Sunday dawned sunny. I got up at 6 a.m., showered, and got dressed in comfortable clothes for the trip. I carried my last 2 suitcases downstairs and put them by the door. Paul and Julia were still sleeping. Rita arrived promptly at 7 a.m. We loaded the suitcases into her SUV. Then I went back inside the house for one last walkthrough. I walked through every room: the living room where Paul had taken his first steps, the kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals, the backyard where my husband used to read the newspaper on Sundays. Every corner had memories, but none of those memories made me want to stay. I went up to what had been my bedroom. Julia had transformed everything. She had changed the curtains, moved the furniture, hung new pictures. There was nothing left of mine there. Perfect, I thought. I went downstairs and found Paul in the living room. He had woken up and was standing there in his pajamas, looking like he hadn't slept. "You're leaving now?" he asked. "Yes." "Can I have your new address?" "I'll give it to Lauren." "I'll give it to Lauren," I replied. "If she decides to share it with you, that's her decision." Paul clenched his jaw. "Is that how things are going to be now?" "That's how things are going to be until you show me that you can respect my boundaries." He didn't respond. I walked toward the door. Before leaving, I turned around one last time. "Take care of yourself, Paul." "You too, Mum," he said, his voice breaking. I left the house and closed the door behind me. I didn't look back. There were no tears, just a long, liberating sigh. Rita was waiting for me in the SUV with a huge smile. "Ready for your new life?" "More than ready," I replied. We drove the 2 hours to the coast, listening to music, laughing, planning everything we were going to do in the new house. Rita was going to stay with me for the weekend to help me settle in. We arrived at the beach house around 10 a.m. The sun was shining over the ocean, and the sound of the waves was the only thing you could hear. Rita turned off the engine, and we both sat for a moment looking at the house. "It's yours," Rita said. It's mine, I repeated, and the words sounded incredible. We got out of the SUV, and I opened the front door with my keys. The house smelled clean, like a new beginning. The windows let in natural light that illuminated every corner. It was small, but perfect. Rita and I spent the rest of the day unpacking. We put my clothes in the closet, arranged the furniture I had bought the week before, and hung some photos on the walls. By the afternoon, the house already felt like a home. We sat on the deck with a bottle of white wine, watching the sunset. The sky was painted with oranges and pinks as the sun sank below the horizon. "I'll toast to you," Rita said, raising her glass. "To the bravest woman I know." We clinked glasses and drank in silence. "Do you think Paul is going to be okay?" I asked after a while. "He'll eventually be fine," Rita replied. "But that's not your responsibility, Adeline." "I know, but he's still my son. And you are still a person who deserves to live without guilt." She was right. I knew it. But decades of being a mother don't disappear overnight. That night, after Rita went to sleep in the guest room, I stayed alone on the deck, looking at the stars. I took out my phone and snapped a photo of the dark sea illuminated only by the moon. I sent it to Lauren with a message. I arrived home. She replied immediately with a heart emoji and the bon. "I'm so happy, Grandma. I'll visit you soon." I smiled, looking at the screen. Then another message came. It was from a number I didn't have saved, but I recognized the area code. It was Paul. "Mom," the message read. "Julia and I got the apartment. We're moving in tomorrow. I just wanted you to know." I didn't reply, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because there was nothing to say. Another message arrived 5 minutes later. "I know you're angry, and I understand, but I hope that someday we can talk." I put the phone away and looked back at the sea. The following days were filled with a peace I hadn't experienced in years. I would wake up to the sound of the waves, have breakfast on the deck, walk on the beach, read, cook just for myself. There was no shouting, no demands, no guilt. Rita stayed with me all week. In the afternoons, we would go for walks on the boardwalk, visit the local markets, and try small restaurants. It was like being on permanent vacation. On Wednesday, while we were having coffee at a cafe facing the sea, my phone rang. It was Dorothy, my sister-in-law. "Adeline," she said when I answered, "I need to talk to you." "Hello, Dorothy. What's wrong?" "Paul told me everything. About the house, the move, everything." "Uh-huh," I said, waiting for the lecture. "And I want you to know that I'm on your side." I was silent, surprised. "What Paul did to you at that dinner was horrible," Dorothy continued. "I was there. I heard it. And I was embarrassed that I didn't say anything. But I was in shock. I couldn't believe my nephew would speak to his mother like that." "Thank you for telling me that," I replied, feeling relieved. "You did the right thing by leaving," she said. "You did the right thing by selling the house. Sometimes family hurts you more than strangers, and you don't have to stay just because they're family." Dorothy and I talked for almost an hour. She told me she had talked to Paul, that she had told him exactly what she thought of his behavior, that Paul had been defensive at first, but that he had eventually admitted he was wrong. "He's scared," Dorothy said. "Scared of having lost you. But he still doesn't understand that he caused this himself." "Someday he will understand," I said. "But it's not my problem anymore." When I hung up, Rita looked at me curiously. "Who was that?" "Dorothy," I replied. "She called to tell me that I did the right thing." Rita smiled. "The world is aligning in your favor, Adeline." That afternoon, as we walked on the beach, I received another message, this time from Julia. It was a long message. It began by saying that she never thought things would go this far, that she had also grown up with a difficult mother, and that maybe that's why she didn't realize when she crossed boundaries, that she regretted making me feel invisible in my own home. She didn't apologize directly, but she came close. I don't know if Paul and you can fix things, she wrote at the end, but I want you to know that I understand why you left. I read the message 3 times, then I showed it to Rita. Are you going to respond? She asked. Not yet, I said. I need time to process. Rita nodded. You have all the time in the world. On Friday, Lauren called me on video chat. Her face appeared on the screen with a radiant smile. Grandma, she said, you look so good. You look happy. I feel happy, I replied. I turned my phone around to show her the view of the sea from the deck. She screamed with excitement. It's beautiful. Grandma, I'm so proud of you. Thank you, my love. How are you? Good, she said. I went to help my dad with the move yesterday. The apartment is small, but it's clean. I think they're going to be okay. I'm glad to hear that. Dad asks about you, Lauren said hesitantly. He doesn't know if he should call you or give you space. Tell him he can call me when he's ready to have a real conversation, I replied. No shouting, no manipulation, just honesty. Lauren nodded. I'll tell him. We spent the rest of the video chat talking about her classes, her work, her life. She told me she had started therapy to process some things about her family. She said her therapist had told her it was important to set healthy boundaries. Just like you, Grandma, she said. You set boundaries and respected yourself. That's what I'm learning too. I felt proud of her. Saturday afternoon, Rita had to go back to the city. We said goodbye with a long hug at the door. Are you going to be okay alone? She asked. I'm going to be perfect, I replied. If you need me, call me, anytime. I know. I watched her drive away in her SUV and then went back into my house. My house. Those words still filled me with wonder. That night, sitting on the deck with a glass of wine, my phone rang. It was Paul. I hesitated before answering. Finally, I swiped the screen. Hello, Paul. Hello, Mum, he said. He sounded tired. Can I talk to you? Go ahead. There was a long pause. Then I heard him take a deep breath. I've been thinking a lot this week about what happened, about what I said, about how I treated you. I'm listening, I said, without making it easy for him. You were right, he finally said. About everything. I treated you as if you were my solution to everything. I yelled at you when I should have respected you. I took your space as if it were my right. And I never, ever asked you how you were or what you needed. I didn't reply. I let the silence do its work. And I know that apologizing isn't going to fix everything, he continued. I know I caused damage that will take time to heal, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. I really am sorry. His voice broke at the end. Thank you for saying that, I replied calmly. I needed to hear it. Do you think you can ever forgive me? I don't know, Paul. Honestly, I don't know. He breathed shakily. I understand. But what I do know, I continued, is that I'm not going back to living like I did before. I'm not going back to being the mother who says yes to everything. I'm not going to sacrifice my peace for your convenience. I won't ask you to, he said. I just want, I don't know. I want to have a relationship with you. A real relationship. Not one where I only call you when I need something. I would like that, I said. But it's going to take time. And it's going to require you to truly change, not just say you're going to change. I will do it, he promised. I will prove it to you. We hung up shortly after. There were no exaggerated promises or instant reconciliation, just a small first step towards something that, perhaps, someday, could become a healthier relationship. I stayed on the deck late that night, listening to the ocean, feeling the salty breeze on my face. For the first time in decades, I wasn't thinking about what someone else needed from me. I was just present, here, now, with myself. The following weeks established a routine that filled me with satisfaction. I would wake up early and walk on the beach before the tourists arrived. The exercise was good for me. It cleared my mind. It gave me energy for the rest of the day. I met other women who also walked in the mornings. Women my age, some widows, others divorced, all looking for the same thing as me: peace, connection, a life of their own. We formed an informal group. We would meet at 7 a.m., walk for an hour, and then have breakfast together at different cafes on the boardwalk. One of them was named Christine Wells, a 65-year-old woman who had been a teacher for 40 years. She told me she had moved to the beach after retiring, tired of living in the city, tired of her family's expectations. It's funny, she told me one day as we had coffee. We spend our whole lives taking care of others, and when we finally decide to take care of ourselves, they call us selfish. Exactly, I replied, as if having a life of your own were a crime. We quickly became friends. Christine introduced me to her circle of friends, women who played cards on Tuesdays, who went to yoga classes on Thursdays, who organized dinners on Saturdays. They welcomed me with open arms. For the first time in years, I had a social life that didn't revolve around my family. I had friends who called me to go out, not to ask for favors. I had plans that I made because I wanted to, not because someone else needed them. 1 month after moving, Lauren came to visit me. She arrived one Friday afternoon with a small backpack and a radiant smile. "Grandma," she said, hugging me tightly, "this is incredible." I showed her every corner of the house. She took photos of everything: the deck, the sea, my room, the kitchen. Then she uploaded a photo to her social media with a message that read, "Visiting the bravest woman I know." That night we cooked together. We prepared fresh fish that I had bought at the market, salad, rice. We ate on the deck, watching the sunset. Lauren told me about college, about her friends, about a guy she liked. It was so different from dinners at my old house. There was no tension, no silent demands, no resentment floating in the air. There was only genuine conversation between two people who truly loved each other. "How is your dad?" I eventually asked. Lauren put her fork down on the plate. "He's okay. Different. Quieter. More thoughtful. I think he's really processing what happened. And Julia? Also different. Less, I don't know how to say it. Less demanding. Maybe." "I'm glad to hear that," I said sincerely. Lauren looked at me with those dark eyes so similar to mine. "Dad wants to visit you, but he's afraid you'll say no." "I won't say no," I replied. "But I'm not ready yet." "I understand," Lauren said. "And he'll understand too." On Saturday, I took Lauren to see my favourite spots: the craft market, the bakery with the best pastries, the overlook with a view of the entire bay. She fell in love with the town as much as I had. "I could live here," she said as we walked along the boardwalk. "It's so peaceful, so beautiful." "Anytime you want, my love. You'll always have a room waiting for you." Lauren left Sunday afternoon. We said goodbye with a long hug. "Take good care of yourself, Grandma, and don't let anyone ever make you feel bad for choosing yourself." "Never again," I promised. I watched her drive away in her car and return to my house, feeling a mix of nostalgia and satisfaction. Nostalgia for the days when Lauren was little, and I was the grandma who spoiled her. Satisfaction because now our relationship was between two adults who respected each other mutually. 2 months after moving, I received a package in the mail. It was from Paul. Inside was a handwritten letter and a framed photo. The photo was of Paul when he was 5 years old. We were in a park, him on my shoulders, both of us laughing. I had forgotten that photo existed. The letter read, "Mum, I found this photo while unpacking. It reminded me of who you always were to me. My safe harbor, my support, my everything. And it made me realize when I stopped treating you that way. I don't know when I started seeing you as a resource instead of a person, but I know it was wrong. I'm going to therapy. My therapist is helping me understand patterns I repeated without realizing it. Patterns of taking without giving, of demanding without thanking, of assuming instead of asking. I'm not writing to ask you to come back or to forgive everything immediately. I just want you to know that I'm working on being better. For me, for Julia, and someday, I hope, for you. I love you, Mum. I've always loved you. I just didn't know how to show it without asking for something in return. Paul." I read the letter 3 times. I cried a little. Not out of sadness, but out of hope. Maybe my son was really changing. Maybe walking away had been the best thing I could have done, not only for myself, but also for him. I took a photo of the letter and sent it to Rita. She replied, "Real progress. But don't let your guard down yet." She was right. Real change takes time. 3 months after moving, I hosted a small gathering at my house. I invited my group of friends from the boardwalk, Christine, Rita, who came from the city, and 3 other women I had met in yoga class. We cooked together, laughed, drank wine, and told stories. Each of us had a similar story. Women who had given so much that they had forgotten about themselves. Women who had finally decided to live. "I'll toast to those who dared," Christine said, raising her glass. "To those who said, 'Enough is enough.' To those who chose peace over guilt." We all toasted. The sound of clinking glasses mixed with laughter and the sound of the sea. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone on the deck with a cup of tea. I took out my phone and opened the Notes app. I wrote, "Today marks 3 months since I moved. 3 months since I made the most difficult and most necessary decision of my life. 3 months since I stopped living for others and started living for myself. And what I discovered is this. I am not selfish for loving myself. I am not a bad mother for setting boundaries. I am not cruel for protecting my peace. I am human. I am a woman who deserves dignity, respect, and tranquility. And finally, after 69 years, I understood it." I saved the note and looked at the dark sea illuminated by the moon. Paul now called me once a week. Short conversations, asking for nothing, just asking how I was. There was still awkwardness between us, but there was also something new, respect. Julia had sent me flowers on my birthday with a card that read, "Happy birthday, Adeline. I hope you're doing well." It was a small but meaningful gesture. Lauren visited me once a month. We had become closer than ever. And I, Adeline Miller, continued to wake up every morning to the sound of the sea. I still had my coffee on the deck. I still walked on the beach with my new friends. I was still building a life that was completely mine. One morning, as I walked along the shore with my bare feet feeling the wet sand, I thought about everything I had left behind and everything I had gained. I had left behind a house full of memories, but empty of respect. I had left behind a version of myself that existed only to serve. I had left behind the guilt they had taught me to carry, and I had gained peace. I had gained dignity. I had gained time for myself. I had gained true friends. I had gained a life of my own. The sun began to rise on the horizon, painting the sky with impossible colors. I stopped and looked at that beauty, feeling completely present. A wave came and wet my feet. I smiled. Finally, after so many years taking care of others, asking myself what they needed, what they wanted, how I could help them, I was finally asking the most important questions. What do I need? What do I want? How can I help myself? And the answers were simple but profound. I need peace. I want freedom. I can help myself by choosing me. I took out my phone and took a selfie with the sunrise behind me. My hair was messy from the wind, my face was without makeup, with wrinkles that told the story of 69 years of life. But my eyes were shining in a way they hadn't shone in decades. I sent the photo to Lauren with a message, "Good morning from paradise." She replied with heart emojis, and then, "I love you, Grandma. You're my inspiration." I put the phone away and kept walking, because that was exactly what I was doing now, keeping walking, forward, toward the life I deserved, toward the peace I had sought for so long. Finally, after many years of being a mother, a wife, a caregiver, a savior, after so many years of being everything to everyone but myself, I was the one who decided who to care for, and I had chosen to care for me.